Hi there, welcome everybody, and good morning. We're here to bringing back the Bluebirds, which is I think something everyone's interested in. Here to introduce our guest speaker, Mrs. Bethany Gray. She's a freelance naturalist, educator, and writer, and an Ohio certified volunteer naturalist. Come on in. She's in partnership with the Yellow Spring Schools in the learning capacity, and is also a recipient of 2 statewide awards this year, the Blue Feather Award from the Ohio Bluebird Society and the OCVN, which is the Ohio Volunteer Naturalist Stewardship Award for Citizen Science and Education, and this is a state award. She's also the current president of the Tecumseh Land and Trust and Glen Helen Association. Please welcome Bethany Gray.
Thank you. Welcome everybody. Just a few notes of business before we get started for clarification. I do a 90-minute to 2-hour presentation sometimes on this topic, so this will be a shortened version. There'll be a lot of information kind of quickly, so if you don't want to take fast notes, I have an email list if you'd like to just share it with me, and I will email you the entire transcript of the written transcript of this presentation, which includes some more information to it for our longer version, so you can get some more background and read it. And I also have some nest box plans for that particular kind of system with the pole baffle, how to make it yourself. So if you're interested in emailing that, I decided to do that instead of making a lot of copies because I didn't know how many copies I'd be making. So I'll just pass this email list around. Thank you. And then, okay. And then, this presentation, before I'm going to ask you an introductory question actually, but this presentation you'll see will be based on a lot of information. This is my 10th year doing bluebird monitoring and advising, consulting for organizations with bluebird trails. And a lot of this information will be taken from the North American Bluebird Society, who follow the best conservation practices. The Ohio Bluebird Society, there are many state affiliates, and we do have a table out in the back of the Ohio Bluebird Society with more brochures and information for you. And also there's another website I'll mention as well later. But if you want to join those organizations, it gives you a lot of great information, great fellowship with people, and the North American Bluebird Society puts out a quarterly journal of actually pretty scholarly research and work of following trends with cavity nesting birds and other related issues. So just wanted to mention that if you want to take a look at the end. And because I'm going to throw a lot of information out at you, you may have a lot of questions that I can't always answer today. So I brought my business cards, and you're welcome to email me anytime, and we'll be happy to try to help you. Ohio Bluebird Society contacts, we like to try to help people with their questions, and whether you are working in a park system or whether you just want to try to put up a box in your own yard. So please feel free to send me an email with any questions. Okay. So a lot of you probably already realize this, but for people who don't, we usually give a brief overview that birds are often indicators of the health of the environment. And why do we spend so much time on bluebirds, one species? There are a couple of reasons. Oftentimes, bluebirds are what people are interested in them. They seem to have a history of being associated with happiness and joy. Bluebirds are over the rainbow from, the Wizard of Oz. And so anything that engages people's interest would be a gateway for them to be engaged in some way in nature. That said, I do want to preface the talk as well with the fact that it takes a little effort to track bluebirds and maintain them in a nest box, and you'll learn why and how. And so actually I've had people leave my presentation saying, I don't think this is for me. That's okay, actually. I'd rather you make an informed decision, but what I do hope you leave with, if you don't want to put up a nest box or monitor a bluebird trail, is that there might be some other action you can do to help these cavity birds, and I think you're going to learn some of that in this presentation. So it's better to make informed decisions about what you can't do and what you feel comfortable with. There is some science to actually maintaining and keeping the bluebirds healthy. They're facing a lot of threats. That's what we're going to look into further. But before we do, there's an interesting quote from a book I read a couple years ago from conservationist and author Marjory Stoneman Douglas. That name might sound a little familiar to you. Sadly, Parkland students, that was Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. But she wrote a book in 1947, and she was warning people and said, the ability of the birds to show us the consequences of our own actions is among their most important but least appreciated attributes. Despite the free advice of the birds, we do not pay attention. So she was writing this back then. You think of canary in the coal mine and those types of features. The birds, if they're in trouble, we're likely in trouble. And in 2009, the first U.S. State of the Birds report showed that a little bit over 2/3 of our bird species in the United States were in some kind of trouble. So that's the depressing part. Here's the positive part. The positive part is actually bluebird conservation is a success story for conservation. Basically because people got involved in a grassroots effort, they recognized that we helped cause problems for these species of birds, and that we actually got together with thousands of volunteers across North America and said, we want to try to do something about this. And because of that, it really is a success story. It shows that something can positively be done. And their populations are a little bit back up to normal. Average population right now from what they had been. We'll learn a little bit more about that. So there are your organizations I was telling you about. They have great websites. The North American Bluebird Society has great color sheets. You can look and read and just read through the whole process of getting started with how to start monitoring a box and what the issues are. Cialis.org, what is that? Cialis is the scientific name for eastern bluebird, and this is a site that I call the Amazon of bluebird conservation. So the Amazon website, apparently. So Bette Zimmerman of the North American Bluebird Society organizes it, and it's very well organized. And even if you go in there to just find an issue about maybe wrens or something, you can find it easily and a lot of information. So that's a great website for you. So there's 3 species of bluebirds. There are a couple of species of birds that often get confused with bluebirds. What might those be? Blue jay. And indigo bunting is another. A lot of people think, because they're all blue, indigo buntings, the males are all blue. So in terms of bluebirds, they are a thrush species, and they have more of the orange, the eastern and the western. But here are the 3 species. Of course, this part of the country will be seeing eastern bluebirds primarily. But western bluebirds are a little similar, obviously, and then the mountain bluebirds have more of a blue color on their chest, abdomen area. And they are in the same thrush family with robins, so kind of looking like similar when you look at them. And where do robins eat? Where do they get a lot of their food? They forage on the ground, worms, insects, and bluebirds do that too during the spring and summer. And we'll talk about their winter behavior, but in the spring and summer, their diet is going to be heavily insects, caterpillars, spiders, dragonflies, all kinds of insects. And they like to perch and look over some open space and look over the ground to do their hunting for their insects. So they may not see them pulling worms like the robins, but you will see them looking over the ground and maybe catching insects from the ground. So what happened to them? My grandmother was born in 1921, and she was born in Chicago but raised heavily in South Haven, Michigan on a farm area, and saw bluebirds all the time. And by the time I was 9, 10 in the 80s, she was seriously concerned how she just didn't see bluebirds anymore. Well, there's a reason for that, actually. By the late 70s and the early 80s, Ohio's population of bluebirds had declined by 90%. And there's many reasons for this, but in the late 70s is when that North American Bluebird Society started to organize and get serious and say we need to do something. And I don't know if anybody would have a memory or recollection of this, but there was a Parade magazine Sunday newspaper supplement that the North American Bluebird Society put out and said we need to help the bluebirds. And they had something like 200,000 responses to this, that we want more information across the country. And that's kind of how some of this grassroots efforts got started. But essentially, bluebirds they are cavity nesting species. They nest inside of trees. They use the cavities that woodpeckers use. And we have cleared a lot of trees, not just for development, for urban development, but for agriculture and commercial agriculture. They like open meadow and grassland. The good thing is they have adapted to suburban grass pretty well, as long as it's not doused too heavily with chemicals, because that will kill the insects. But they have adapted to the open space that we've created with grass. But we've taken a lot, of course, our open grasslands and meadows away as well. We also tend to cut down dead trees, which are snags, which some of you know about. And snags cavities can be made inside of live trees, but when they become more hollow, they're more attractive. Woodpeckers make their cavity holes in them, and so they really like to live in these parts of snags. And snags are used by other species, like bats, for roosting, and owls and so forth. And a snag could also be a part of a dead branch that's just on a tree. So we want to be safe and practice safe practices with dead trees, but we've also become almost too extreme in that we have to take down everything and trim down everything right away when it becomes dead. And that's not good for the bluebirds or other species. There was also a lot of increased pesticides. DDT, Rachel Carson, who wrote Silent Spring about the warnings of DDT, bluebirds were also impacted by that. So we're probably seeing some healthier trends in populations also, as we are with eagles and hawks since we've banned DDT. But they are particularly sensitive to chemicals. And they're also sensitive to harsh winters. We were just talking here earlier, the blizzard of 1978 wiped out a lot of the population. Bluebirds will actually, some of them here will go further south to maybe areas of like Georgia, Tennessee, but some of them significantly will stay here in the winter time, and they will, if there's food source, but they take a big risk, because while everything is in danger of severe temperature drops, they're particularly sensitive to the harsh drops. You know, when we get those wind chills -5, if we may have a sustained week of that, they're particularly sensitive to those. So here are some of your snags, and again, we don't recommend you keeping a snag where it's not safe, or it's right by something where it would fall on something. But if you can keep some parts of dead trees on a property, or with all of these ash trees that have been dying off, some people decided to maybe even cut half the tree, take half of it for firewood or something, leave the other half for wildlife, essentially. And the insects that will come to those dead trees will also be very beneficial food for wildlife. And you'll see here, I used to live in Dublin, which is in Columbus area, And I just found this interesting because, you know, in the back it's very pristine, landscaped parkland and retirement center area here. But just a little, someone left just a little bit of a stump in there. You probably can't see because she's blended in pretty well, but there's a female mallard using that. So just leaving something a little messy and a little wild can make a big difference. And City of Dublin, even though there's a lot of development there, was pretty forward thinking and got certified with the National Wildlife Federation and saved areas of green space and did some good practices along with their development. And they actually, when I lived there in 2010 and 2011, they had a practice of leaving up snag, dead trees, in areas where it was safe, you know, where it would not impact human activity. So they were pretty forward thinking on that. So here are your primary, woodpeckers are our primary cavity nesting bird species. Does anyone know what this woodpecker is? Pileated woodpecker. This was in our backyard actually, and he wasn't really using that cavity was already there, but he was interested in looking inside of it. So the woodpeckers are called primary cavity nesting birds because they make the cavities and the holes. And I tell children it's like what's a cavity in your teeth? It's a hole. So there are different types of nesting birds. There are ground nesting birds on the ground, nesting birds in the open, and then there are cavity nesting birds that use cavities. And some of them have even adapted to use things like newspaper boxes on mailboxes, you know, that it's some kind of cavity. Has anyone ever seen something like that where they've used like a newspaper? Yeah, wrens will do that a lot. They'll seemingly not be afraid to nest anywhere. So bluebirds, and there are other species of birds which you'll see coming up, are called secondary cavity nesting birds because they use them. They don't create them, but they use them after others. And the picture on the left is a picture of a juvenile. Do you see how it's sort of spotted a little bit? And the picture on the right, of course, is a male. And so this is what it would look like in a natural tree cavity. And I have actually spotted bluebirds nesting in natural tree cavities, more so in snags and parts of dead trees than I have live trees, but I have seen them. And the juveniles will take, once they leave, they might take up to 1 to 2 weeks or so to really get fully independent, so they might still continue to be fed by parents and taught by parents, and that's when they're most vulnerable to predators, of course, during that learning period. So what do bluebirds like? We're going to talk about it first, and then we're going to look at some pictures of maybe some habitat areas, okay? And I didn't ask you this in the beginning. I should ask you now. How many of you actually have tried a bluebird box or have been on a trail? Okay, great. A lot of you. That's great. So you probably know a lot of this and we'll chime in some of our experiences as well. But bluebirds like that open space, like I said, for hunting. So you don't want to put a box in the middle of the wooded area. You know, you could be sort of near the edge of a wooded area, but they need some access to open grassy space. They like a sparser mix of trees, so they like to perch either high on trees, or how many of you have seen birds perch a lot on wires? Yeah, bluebirds seem to like to perch on electric wires, I see, looking down over their nest or their hunting ground. All birds, of course, need water, but they are particularly attracted to water. So if there's a water source near there, it makes it even a better place for them. We tell people to beware of placing too many boxes along wood lines, heavy wood lines, and we're going to learn more about that here today. But house wrens are another species that will use these cavities in these boxes, and they are very attracted to wooded areas. So it's okay to have some of them, but you don't want to have your whole bluebird trail filled with wrens, and we'll talk about why coming up soon. People have also put a pair of boxes. Has anyone tried putting two or a pair? Okay, because you will get, so sometimes maybe just one species will move in and that'll work for a while, but then you will start getting a lot of competition from native birds and also an invasive bird that we're going to talk about, house sparrow. And having a second box in a pair sometimes eases that. It makes a little more effort for you, but it definitely helps that bluebird who's trying to move in when there's other competition. Oh, and of course, we don't really want to put a bluebird box, which I've seen, right outside the door of a building like this. You know, they're just, they could use it. I've seen some things happen where bluebirds might use it, but they need a little more space. And anything too close to a building is going to attract an invasive type of bird called a house sparrow, which like buildings, and we're going to talk about that a little more too. So let's look at some photographs together. You can't see the bluebird boxes in this picture because they're too far away. This is Cedar Creek State Park area, not far from here. And the bluebird boxes are up the hill. If you see little white specks at all, those are baffles. Those are like white baffles like that. But what makes this like good habitat?
The water.
Is there a good source of water? Yeah. Yeah, and they're also in the middle of the open space, so they have a perch area with trees, but you notice, well, you can't notice fully on here, but they're not directly next to the woods or the trees, because remember those wrens, I said try to get them a little bit more out in the open. It's okay to put them out in an open prairie if there are no trees, but what we sometimes do is put like a wood stake out there, and they'll use those as perches, sort of in place of trees, because they do like to perch and watch over their nest box. Here are some other pictures. One is older. They actually, in the earlier years of this, they used to use grease on the poles to keep predators from climbing up and getting into the boxes, but then we've stopped that because that gets really nasty for other bird species and wildlife. And so now it's recommended to use baffles, which could be stovepipe type baffles made of metal. We use a lot of PVC to keep it cheap. That works pretty effectively. But let's look at the picture on the left. What's good about this? What does this have in terms of habitat that might be good? It's open space.
There's a dead tree.
Yeah, there's actually a snag, which they might use. Yeah, there's a wire, there's even a fence, which they can use a fence to perch on. Also, the picture on the right is in Dublin, Ohio, and it's this system here because this system was actually created by some bluebird monitors in Dublin, and it does have the approval of the North American Bluebird Society. But you'll notice in areas where they're commercially mowed, you see that used to be a mound where a tree was, and the tree died. And so we didn't put it out in the mowed areas, because what we see with areas that have other mowers is these commercial mowers are so fast they hit these poles. And so if it's something they have to go around anyway, then or put it sort of away from the mowed area, that's what we try to do. But you'll notice it's not next to the stadium either, right? Because we don't want it that close to human activity where there's a lot of house sparrow birds that will be attracted. And it's also got some good open space. Like I said, they have adapted to suburbia and suburban type grass and open space. I will mention too that nest boxes became the alternative for the tree cavities, so allowing additional space for them, but also with monitors stepping in to check on them, it gave them an extra boost in order to survive. So this is just something I tell people: if you don't have a conducive yard, if you have a really tight yard, close together homes, it's probably not, you may not get bluebirds at all. But there might be other places and options that if you wanted to try a bluebird box that have that more open area. You might have cemeteries. A lot of churches around this area have really large open space with mixed trees. School campuses, but again, you want it away from too much human activity. A friend's farm, sometimes golf courses. I actually monitor here in Beaver Creek at a golf club. They have a special certification where they use less chemicals and so forth. And they're on their 8th bluebird nest out there, pretty successful. And then park systems and so forth might have a program that you can join as well. So the big question becomes, for bluebird monitors, is becoming responsible landlords. And essentially, even though human intervention is necessary and helpful right now for the populations of the birds, you notice that putting a nest box in the middle of a space is it's more conspicuous to predators versus when they're more camouflaged, so to speak, in a tree, and there's a little bit more protection there. So because of this risk, should we even mess with this? Should we give them the risk of putting a box up like this? Birders, conservationists, quoted from Birdwatchers Digest, says, should we use them? Yes, but only if we accept responsibility. And so this is where people sometimes say, I don't think this is for me, and that's okay, because we do want to not set them up for continual failure. If you want to help the bluebird population, if that's the goal, to help their populations be maintained and increase, then we should be committed to some basic practices for them, essentially. And a lot of bluebird monitors will tell you it's actually better to not put a box up at all than to just stick them somewhere and just never ever check them, because you could get mice, you could get all kinds of things. You might get dead birds in there from activity. So it's okay not to put a box up too. It might be better if you're not going to check it. And also, how many of you have seen any boxes on trees in Ohio? Have you seen that? In Ohio, that's probably not a good idea. Why? Snakes and another big mammal predator. Raccoons are pretty populous here, so maybe out west further where it might not be a problem as much, but we have a real big problem with raccoons getting into climbing up trees. And yeah, they could do that in a natural cavity, but again, they're a little bit well hidden, and raccoons will just get right up on that tree and reach right in. We call it like putting up a candy machine for them, because they'll just reach right in and get those eggs. So that's part of the educational component too, is if people can remove their box off their tree and put it on a separate post, that's probably better. So we're gonna look at this sample here, and we'll see some predators. We're gonna look at a checklist for a nest box, and you'll notice I prefer from the research I've done is to keep them wood, like cedar or pine wood. And it's okay if it's reclaimed wood that has a little paint on them, but it's really not best to have them painted heavily and sealed up. Do you have an idea why? Yeah, the temperatures, the heat, that'll trap a lot of heat in there. And so we need it to be more of like a tree cavity and have a little bit more fluctuation of temperature. So the cedar and pine wood will provide some of that, but it won't be a perfect protection against ultra heat or ultra cold in the spring, but it'll give them a better chance than sealed paint pretty heavily. We don't have a perch on here because perches actually attract invasive house sparrow birds, which we'll be talking about. It should be able to be opened from the front or the side. So this particular one opens on the side. And this one we put screws in because of being on public lands. If we're on public lands or places where other people are, we've unfortunately had vandalism. Just, I don't know, kids trying to do things, or just people curious who want to open them constantly. And so we can't open them all the time, constantly be too disruptive for the birds. So the screw just kind of keeps that closed off and a little bit more protective. Some of the styles you'll see open from the front. And essentially, there are different styles of boxes, and I tend to use or recommend whatever the North American Bluebird Society approves or recommends. So on their website, they're going to have some different styles for you. Notice the size of the hole. That's actually a 1.5-inch hole. If you want to put a box up that you don't have to bother and worry about or check it, you might want to get a wren house or a chickadee house, and that size of that hole is a little smaller. It's 1.25 inch, and that will keep out house sparrows, the invasive birds you don't want. However, it won't attract your bluebirds. So if you do want bluebirds, you do need that 1.5 inch size hole that they'll use. The good news is there's two kind of invasive birds, European starlings and house sparrows, that will be a lethal problem to these bluebirds and these birds. But that hole will automatically keep starlings out, so that's 50% of your problem. At least you don't have to deal with the starlings. You'll notice the predator baffle. And I said in Ohio we probably shouldn't put them on trees. And some people, I've seen this too. Has anyone seen them on really low fences? Like they'll just put them on the wood fence really low. People have that idea because, do you remember at all that bluebirds years ago used to nest and try to nest in old wood fence posts? Does that sound familiar? And sometimes that would work and sometimes not. I have seen recently a bluebird nest in a fence post, a wood fence post on a farm, an old one, and it didn't make it. I probably got a raccoon in it or something. But because they used to do that when wood fence posts were more prolific, like in the 1940s, people think, oh, we'll just put the box on the fence and that'll work. But what's going to, again, reach right in there? Yeah, cats, anything can just kind of reach right in there and get those eggs. So here are your predators, but I will tell you that since we have used baffles pretty regularly, we just don't have these kinds of issues. And as long as you don't stick it like right under a tree where these things could maybe jump on the boxes, we just don't have the problems. Yeah.
I'm just curious if you can tell a little bit about how the baffle works. Why is it a deterrent?
Yes, so the baffle works for anything climbing up, to try to climb up, and which they will do even on a post or a pole. And so these climbing predators, raccoons, snakes are another one. Black rat snakes are common to find in bluebirds' boxes, which you may not want to find if you're opening. So that's a great reason for a baffle. I've been doing this many years and I've just not come across these problems when there are baffles on these boxes. And then deer mice can climb right in. And deer mice, they make a stinky nest if they get in there. And you want to be careful if that happens because they carry hantavirus. And so I've had to go out on old trails to try to clean them up, and I use gloves and protection and everything, clean them out from old mice nests. But this is also good to know, because if you do put something in your yard, you don't necessarily want to attract these problems to your yard either, just on a personal level. So yes, these PVC pipes actually work pretty well, and I haven't had a lot of problems.
I had a metal one on a bird feeder. I've seen the raccoon shinny right up there.
The metal ones?
Yep.
Does it come out like a cone, or does it straight down? Okay, that's interesting. So I haven't seen that on the PVC pipes. I do have a metal baffle on my bird feeder, and I've seen the squirrels try to get up They can't get up, but that's interesting. It's always a science to see what is working and maybe what. So here's the problem with fences and trees and everything. So cats are a big problem, and this is why you don't want to necessarily put them accessible to any kind of animal. Because it's, you know, these are native species trying to get a shot at it. So the subject of cats is very controversial sometimes to people, but the bottom line is, I mean, I used to have outdoor cats, and they used to kill birds and butterflies and all kinds of things. And now I've rescued cats from nature preserves that were dumped there. And now I keep them indoors, and I have some information on my table about healthy ways to keep your cat happy indoors and what you can do for that. And I recommend trying that because I've learned over time that cats are not natural predators. They've been introduced into our ecosystem here, and many of them don't need them for food. So it's basically they're hunting for sport, but it's not necessary for them for food. So if anyone's interested in learning more about happy ways to keep your cat indoors, there are some flyers on my table. That's another problem you might face in a box, which a baffle isn't going to help because the ants go through actually the baffle sometimes. But ants will climb up and infest a nest. You also might get a wasp that tries to get in there from time to time. And while I'm going to go through some of this, while a baffle won't work, what we have found is helpful is again, we don't recommend like gelling everything up heavily because you don't want this to get on the birds or things. So you don't want to put this where the birds, you know, could touch it. But we found that if you have a post, wood post, metal post and pole, putting some dab of petroleum jelly right around this part of the post where the ants would be climbing up deters them from climbing all the way up, and they'll usually go underneath and get into the drainage holes, and they can infest the whole nest, and it kind of gets messy. And if that would ever happen, sometimes you have to kind of remove the bottom part of the nest and just take out the bottom part, try to scrape all the ants out as much as you can. Some people will use some dried grass or pine needles to kind of stuff in there underneath. But one of the best ways we've helped deter some of that is just to dab it, you know, in an area here where they're not going to be touching it. Again, you wouldn't want to put it here or here. We've also put some on the side where wasps won't always use this, but they'll sometimes squeeze in the side air vents, and we've put a dab on the underneath of the roof here, where they would try to enter that area, and it seems to help. It's maybe not 100%, but it seems to help and be pretty effective for any wasps trying to get in there and make a nest in there. So we'll look at monitoring practices and etiquette, and even though this is a little bit of a commitment and work, it's actually very rewarding work, and you'll find yourself, again, maybe you might skip a week and not check it that week, but you'll find yourself very interested in doing this once you start and helping, and once you see the birds, which we'll see some pictures here soon of some of the species. But it's best practice is to try to start monitoring or checking your box once a week, starting in March and going through now, even through mid-August. The bluebirds can nest through August. Look at a nesting timetable. We recommend keeping a little note when you go in and say, you know, July 27th I checked the box and it was a bluebird and it had 3 eggs, you know, and keeping those notes in there because it'll help you see if something might be wrong, like, oh, my eggs aren't hatching for how many days now? Something might be wrong. it also gives you an idea that you don't want to open that box once those bluebirds get older, or those birds, any bird, gets older and starts making noise and getting like they're going to leave that box soon. Because what's happened, mostly with wrens, but it can happen, is you open it and they leave too soon. And then they're on the ground and they're not flying. And so we have to like get them and put them back. So about 12 to 13 days after hatching approximately, it's good to just kind of let them be and not open that up. We said keeping a notebook is helpful. Sometimes with students, we tell them to try to make some noise, approach the box a little bit. I even tap on the box because, to give them a warning that we're going to check it. It's okay to check it once, even twice a week if you need to go back if there's problems. We just don't recommend you go every day peeking in. That's too disruptive. But once or twice, even 2 times a week is okay. When you open it, once in a while, the mother will not leave. And I guess there's different thoughts on it, but for me, I don't force her out. If she's not leaving, even with me here and the noise, she's on her eggs and she doesn't want to leave. So I just mark that in my data, and I personally don't force her out. There are some birds called tree swallows that, I don't know if any of you know tree swallows. We're going to see some pictures of what they look like. But some of these birds will dive bomb at you. And they'll get pretty close, and they won't hurt you. But just be prepared, they're going to fly really close and make noise. And they're trying to protect and defend their nest, obviously. So it's okay that they do that. And we recommend not being here longer than a minute or 2. It's not something you want to sit there with the whole thing open. And this is good for students too who are learning how to do this. We allow students in our 7th grade program that I work with, we allow them to take a little picture for their data, so they don't stay long. But another tool that's helpful, I use an automotive mirror. And so, because this actually is a model, but this is actually a little shorter. So this usually stands at my head. I'm about 5'6". So I kind of reach up like this when I open the box, and I just can see like how many eggs are in there and how many, without pulling it down and risking, touching it to eggs too much. So that really allows me to see it pretty well.
What do you call this?
It's like a little automotive mirror. They're only like $6, $7 usually. You could get them online too. And also, we recommend not opening the box when there's rain or cold temperature drops in the spring. Heavy rain, I should say. Just don't worry about doing it because it could affect the birds with hypothermia or something like that. We do recommend you can go ahead. Sometimes I take a little trash bag and I remove the old nests right after they leave, because there's another group probably going to, or maybe the same pair will actually nest again, and they're going to just nest on top of the old dirty nest, and it actually just helps keep it all clean and ready to go. Migratory Bird Treaty Act, it does protect against vandalism, but you can't always find them in the act. But that law is being sort of threatened right now in the last few years, so I don't know where that's going to go. But technically, there can be fines for several $1,000s for such acts. So we'll look at these different pictures. And you want to look for bluebirds. They can start looking around in February. I've seen them looking around. But they can start nesting in late March. Sometimes they won't start until April. And they can have up to 3 sometimes broods, but at least 2. And there's the progression. And they have very neat, it's hard to see here, but you'll see in another picture, a very neat grassy nest with a wide cup in the middle. And they usually use dried grass or pine needles. Once in a while they'll use a small little feather or 2 to line the cup. Every once in a while I'll see that. Now you see the age of the birds on the right where the eyes are starting to open. They're pretty lethargic there, but I would not open the box after that because they're getting pretty old and they might fledge a little too soon. So that would probably be the last time I check on them until they're much out of the box. Tree swallows, here are your swallows, and what they start looking a little bit using dried grass like the bluebird's nest, but what are they adding? Some large feathers, usually like goose or chicken feathers, and you'll notice the middle picture, sometimes they only use a few, and other times they really go at it and cover the whole nest with a wall of feathers. And I've seen tree swallows be particularly protective and not always leave if the mother is on the nest or happens to be on the nest. And tree swallows have adapted to using these nest boxes also, and they're a native species that can benefit and need our help. So we've learned to, I guess, accept them and welcome them into nest boxes. Scientists are tracking of how many boxes they're using. Sometimes on some trails, it's just mostly all tree swallows and not bluebird. And you don't have to read all this, but the bottom line is from the Bluebird Journal is that tree swallows with a whole brood of 4 to 7 nestlings are they're eating from the air, not from the ground. They're eating from the air, which includes a lot of mosquitoes. They're eating about 6,000 insects per day, and this adds up to a total nesting family of about 300,000 insects per tree swallow family. So we always encourage people and say, if you have tree swallows, you're getting free mosquito control. Maybe not 100%, but you're getting a lot of free insect control. Chickadees. Anyone ever have a chickadee nest? They're pretty cute. Carolina chickadees tend to be more in this southern part of Ohio, southern half, I guess. They're only going to usually nest one time in this early spring, so you won't see them after May usually, but they could use the box. And again, we have a lot of competitors, so chickadees tend to get kicked out a little easier by even bluebirds. And so there are some ways I put on my transcript notes that you can actually reduce the hole size of that and keep them a little safer while they nest. But you can see they use moss and they line it with grass and fir. And they may have up to 7 eggs in there because they're only going to usually have 1 brood. And then house wrens, they are native and they are protected and we can't mess with them too much. But caution on a bluebird trail, because house wrens can actually go in and prick eggs and sometimes outright destroy nests and babies even of other native species. So while they're native and protected and they use cavities, you don't want your entire bluebird trail to fill up with them. Like if it's May 30th and you have 8 boxes on a trail and you have 6 boxes with house wrens, that's not a good idea because you're just not going to get as many bluebirds and other species. So the best way to judge that is sometimes maybe the next season you can adjust that box or adjust those boxes. And I've tried it in my yard. I can only seem to get house wrens because I have a lot of trees, maybe not enough open space. But you can try to adjust those to put a little bit more out in the open, which has worked in some cases, to put them a little bit farther out in the open away from tree wooded area. They will use sticks and they will line the top of the sticks with grass, and they are very fertile. They will lay many eggs and they're usually somewhat successful. But if you see a problem in a nest that has like nesting material outside of the box, it could be a house wren. They will also make dummy nests, which the male will just put a few sticks in, and the female actually chooses which one she wants to do. And so if you monitor and you just see the dummy nest where it's not progressing, you can go ahead after about 2 weeks and just remove that and make it open for some other species. This is an example of native competition. So when it's native birds, we are hands off and have to let this happen, apparently, and just watch it. But this is a very neat grassy bluebird nest but someone else was competing. What was competing? Can you guess? Tree swallow. And one day I saw both of them, and one day it's like they stuck their feather in there, and it gets kind of compete. They definitely compete heavily at times, and so I kind of forget which one went out here, but that's something where we kind of have to be hands off and watch that. The house sparrow is where we can be hands-on and intervene when necessary, because they are an introduced species. We brought them here in the 1800s, initially to take care of pests in agricultural fields, but they turned out to be eating the food and the grain, and they became pests themselves. As early as 1903, the Ohio Ornithological Society was writing that perhaps the most deplorable event in ornithology of America was the introduction of this bird. It's unfortunate because these birds are very common around our urban areas, and that is their advantage. That is a positive advantage where they can adapt to our urban settings and live near our buildings. They are called house sparrows. These are the ones you're going to see in the drive-thrus that are picking up all the crumbs, from the restaurants and so forth. They make a loud chirp, chirp, chirp noise over and over. So I can tell you, though, that even having boxes in the middle of the most rural areas around here in this area, they will show up sometimes. So nothing is 100% proof. But, and you will see they start kind of messy, and you see they start swooping their nest upward. So if you see a swooping like that of your grass, you may have that problem. And this is a complete swooping nest with eggs that I took out of the box. You can see how thick it is. You are allowed to remove them legally. They are not protected by laws. And neither are European starlings. But like I said, European starlings will not use these boxes. But this is the unfortunate problem, is that the native birds will compete and defend and keep them out if it's outside of the cavities. But if this is happening here, we know it's happening in the tree cavities too. What happens is once they get inside the cavities, these birds have only been here 100 years, where these other native birds have been here a lot longer. And they haven't adapted. Their beaks have not adapted to the beak fight that the house sparrow does. And the house sparrow usually bludgeons the head and bludgeons the babies and bludgeons the birds to death. And that's a major reason why their population has also declined, unfortunately, is the introduction of these species. And so, because people do ask, well, don't they defend themselves? It's just they haven't been able to evolve or adapt quickly enough. And what happens is once they get inside the cavity, it's not a fair fight, essentially. And then they will do it to the babies and then just nest right on top of the dead babies. So this is why you just want to make sure, and people will often be horrified, like, I have dead babies, what happened? It's probably a house sparrow is the culprit. And so there's a lot of ways to do different management, and there's a lot of all the way down the line to humanely euthanizing these birds, which people have done. I have done it on trails. I actually, but we try to use other methods so we don't have to get there right away and constantly do this. But we have found that they are more successful when we actually remove the entire bird out of the trail or out of the area. And so if I do have to euthanize a bird, I actually take mine to the Glen Helen Raptor Center where they use them as food, because these small birds would be used, they would be food anyway for hawks and eagles. And so I feel like that's putting them back in the cycle just a little earlier maybe, but it is making me feel better about the process a little bit. And also, bluebirds are food for these larger animals too. So, that's how I look at it. But I understand that not everyone is comfortable with it. So there are other ways to work up to this. Again, keep them away from food where people picnic, animal food, like you don't want to put it right next to a barn where there's animal food. Put it farther away, because house sparrows like to congregate where there's activity with food. You can remove their nest, but they're often going to come back. If they've chosen that area, they're often going to come back. Some people have left the nest in and they've pricked the eggs with a needle so that they never hatch. And so if you have like 2 boxes and you just have house sparrow coming to that other one, you can at least just work with that box and just leave them there, and then the eggs won't hatch. There's different ways that have been tried. They don't always work. But a step that I've created for people who don't want to do the entire process of trapping and euthanizing is this. This information's in your packet that I'll send you, but there's a Van Oort trap if you know a house sparrow's going in there, and they have screws that you can put in the box, and what happens is when the bird flies in, that little red dot will appear so you know that the bird is trapped. And I just use a little drawstring bag and I put it over the box, and the bird flies into that instead of trying to reach in for me and it might escape and fly out. So once you have a trapped bird, that's when you can discreetly go and euthanize it. Or for people who really can't do that, I've had some people who go elsewhere on the property. You can't drive it anywhere. It's not really legal to do that, so you can't really drive it somewhere and release it. But they go elsewhere on the property and they spook it out and release it. And that's still keeping the bird around, so it could be still problematic, but it has been somewhat effective to release it. So if you can, it's better to just get the bird out of there completely, but for people who are working themselves up to that, they have done that.
Why can't you, if it's not protected, why can't you drive it someplace else?
Technically, people do that all the time with raccoons. They transport them. It's not legal in Ohio to take any wildlife and transport it and drop it on another property. So for people trap animals all the time, like raccoons, and then they go dump them somewhere, it's not legal. And part of that is transporting diseases, potential diseases from one place to another, or introducing that species into that area. And so again, it may not seem like a big deal with birds, but I just don't want to encourage people to break the law fully. And then this actually is very helpful too, which is information. Yes, Oh, sure, 5 minutes, yeah. Good reminder. So this is information is on your packet too. This is right here in Beaver Creek, Phillips Park on Dayton Xenia Avenue. You can see where there's a tree to the right of it. You can't see that the bluebird likes to perch and fly into. Bluebirds are attracted heavily to this area. However, you see the house in there. There's chicken coops. And we have had house sparrow issues, but because we have so many bluebirds attracted to this area, we've had a monitor that's willing to monitor the house sparrows. And so one thing though that happens is, has anyone ever seen this or heard of this? This is called a sparrow spooker. You can make them or you can order them for $19. And I have that information in your packet. You can't put it up all the time because it can spook other birds. But the theory is once a bird lays the egg in that nest, the first egg, they are bonded. That's their box. And usually bluebirds and other native birds, I only use them for bluebirds. I don't use them for all the species, but usually they will accept the spooker. But the theory is that the house sparrows like to claim the box by hopping on the roof all over the place and chirping on it, and they don't like that waving in there. And so they have been pretty effective. The only problem is you can't use it all the time. You have to wait till that native bird goes in. And here's another intermediate step that I have found helpful for I don't have time to necessarily trap or anything. Another intermediate step is if I want to move a house sparrow along, I may not have time to trap, or if I have you're doing a larger trail, is I get these little drain stoppers that are 1.5 inch, and I just temporarily plug the hole for a couple of days. It does sacrifice the box for other native species, but it moves the other birds on, like just chew, and I don't have time to do the trap and mess with you right now. So I have found temporarily trapping up the hole and then reopening it. Especially if you're getting a major house sparrow problem anyway, the native bird is gonna maybe not be in there regardless. So you're not necessarily keeping the native bird out when the invasive bird is heavily attracted there anyway. So one of these are really cheap and can just temporarily plug up that hole. So there's a lot of different ways and fun ways you can try, and I would recommend the Sparrow Spooker because it really does help keep the sparrows away while you have a nest.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes,
If you have two nests close together, do house sparrows take both of them?
Two nests close together, you want to be careful if you just remove a house sparrow nest and you've got a bluebird near you, like within a pair, because the house sparrow has been known to come in and take, it's not revenge, but it looks like they take revenge on that pair. They think that the pair of bluebirds removed that nest. So you want to be careful of what you do with the house sparrow nearby. And then lastly, I'll wind it up here. There's information on my table about NestWatch of how to input data from your nest into Cornell's database, and you get a free account and you get to see a lot of the birds, of course, are in nest boxes, but you could input data from any nest in your yard, whether it be cardinals or doves, and they would love to they've done studies with data from nest boxes in Ohio and Ohio agriculture. So they're using it in research. There's your last picture. And lastly, I'll just mention that in the winters, the birds may use these boxes for roosting, okay? So they may keep warm from it, they may not. But just let you know, you can keep them open. If you do, you just want to check for house sparrows a little bit earlier, because sometimes they may look around as early as February, because the house sparrows kind of stay around all year, hang out. And you just want to make sure you check on them. And I have a list that I will send you also, but I have it on my table in the back. That has a list of native plants. In the winter, they shift their diet to fruit. And so it's really important to get native plants that support fruit, because the honeysuckle berries and the invasive fruit berries actually are more like eating sugar all winter. It's not really good protein or carbs for them. Any last questions?
We feed mealworms.
Yes. Yes.
You can buy dried mealworms.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the easiest, and they seem to like them.
Mm-hmm.
I did do live mealworms once, and it's more expensive, and I don't think it's necessary there. And you can also make get a plan to make a box that you can put your mealworms in, because if you don't, the sparrows will get the mealworms. And they can adjust, they won't go in the box that you make for some reason.
Yeah.
For bluebirds.
Yeah.
Good luck with that. You can buy those.
Yeah, dried mealworms are good. They're a little bit more pricey, but they are definitely effective, and you can try them in the winter too, putting them out and seeing, you might get other species eating them too, but putting dried mealworms out. Sometimes when I've know that the bluebirds are coming for their babies, I've put a few mealworms on the roof and just watched it, and they come right away and they get them. You know, make sure that they actually are eating them and I'm not attracting other species there. So,
So how in a tree, how deep and how wide does the cavity need to be? And does it matter whether it's on top or on the side?
The depth of it, about this width is good because if the nest gets too close to the opening of the hole, it's a little bit easier for something to reach in and grab them versus reach down. So about this width is good. You'll notice too, that particular roof, there's different styles, but the slanting of the roof kind of covers the hole a little bit, drives the rain a little further.
If you wanted to take a dead tree and kind of help it by getting a hole started, what shape should it be?
I think actually just keeping the dead tree, and then the birds will do the rest. The woodpeckers and other birds will create it, and they will use what they like and find what they like.
I've kind of wondered about the genetics of the bluebirds. Like if you have numerous boxes up, that next generation, do they leave the area, or are you getting? I was just.
The brood of the first nest, the brood that fledges from the first nest, will sometimes stick around and help raise the next brood. Actually,
The following year, are you still likely getting the same?
they could come back, yes, especially if they stay around the winter time and they don't leave. Then they will be in that area, and they could come back and use the same.
So there's no dispersal as far. I was just thinking there would be genetics concern if you have a lot of bluebird boxes, and it would seem to me that you need to leave. Maybe that's not a concern with birds as much.
I haven't heard that particularly with bluebirds. I'll have to look that up a little more because I do know that some of them will go further south and they may not come back to the same location, but some will stay around in the same area.
They mate for life.
I think bluebirds do.
Some people put striations or something across the front. Is that necessary?
Well, actually, we have them in the inside of the box. It's more, you could do that for the bird to have a grip on the box because it's like a tree. It's rougher, like a tree to perch onto. The inside is even more important because tree swallow fledglings in particular have a hard time getting themselves out, and they'll use those grooves to kind of climb out. So again, this was a lot of information. Thank you for attending. I have my cards if you want to send me an email or call or whatever and ask me more questions. You have a quick question?
Just a comment. Has anybody, I have mason bee boxes, and when I have ant issues, there's a cinnamon product that's an oil that you can use out of a tube along the edge or around wherever the ants are coming up. And I wondered if that would also help with the ant issue or the insect issue.
It may. I'll have to look that up and see if it's okay with the bird boxes in particular.
Wild birds.
Oh, great. Well, thank you. Please feel free to visit my table and ask me any questions you might have. Did that email list go around, or is it? Oh, it's up here. Okay. Thank you.